I gently beseeched Mike. My voice trembled like a breeze infiltrating a little crack in a door. Each articulation was a struggle. My throat tightened as if suppressing something ready to break out, while my heart pounded forcefully against my chest, beating with such fervor that it appeared on the brink of bursting. Clutching the edge of the blanket firmly, my respiration is becoming irregular, labored, and superficial. Each subtle sound in the silent room caused my pulse to race, fearing that this delicate moment might be exposed. Greetings, I am Lynn. Today I will recount my narrative. I believed I would confine it eternally and never dare to mention it. The poignant reality is that I am the one at fault in this narrative. It resembles a bizarre tale, analogous to a cinematic plot, yet it transpired in my life despite my efforts to obliterate it. The memories are indelibly imprinted in my heart, tormenting me incessantly. I often contemplate whether I will ever be able to atone and obtain forgiveness from the individual I have profoundly harmed. The harm I inflicted transcended emotional pain. It inflicted a breach of confidence that may remain irreparable, and despite my efforts to forget, I cannot obliterate it. I am a young woman residing in Carmel, by the sea. A serene and picturesque village along the California coast evokes a sense of timelessness akin to the ocean. My father, Mike, operates a cherished seafood restaurant in the locality. He is an individual who diligently maintains his health, frequents the gym, and, although approaching 50, has preserved a toned and robust physique that renders him appearing significantly younger. He possesses power and determination, yet he has consistently exhibited gentleness towards himself. My mother, Nina, is an educator specializing in high school literature. She is elegant, compassionate, and profoundly devoted to classical literature. Each evening, she occupies a position near the window, holding a book, her visage illuminated by the gentle radiance of the lamp. She has consistently imparted her wisdom to me, instructing me to live genuinely and to openly experience and express my emotions from my earliest recollections. I was enveloped by their affection. My parents devoted themselves to my upbringing, shielding me from any threat during my childhood. Upon my father's return from work, I would hasten to him, leaping into his embrace and clinging to him as he elevated me off the ground. He constituted my entire universe. I was an exuberant girl captivated by beauty and vibrant colors, cherishing elegant garments each time I spun for my parents. I would anticipate their expressions of pride with enthusiasm. Their uncomplicated compliments rendered me the happiest girl in the world each night after supper when we convened. In the living room, I would curl up on my father's lap, experiencing safety and warmth in his arms. It was a valued ritual, a connection I was reluctant to relinquish despite my maturation. I maintained this habit, desiring to preserve the sense of security he offered. It was my small source of joy, a connection I could not envision altering. However, recently, whenever I sat near him or embraced him, I sensed a shift, a subtle alteration I could not disregard. Longer surrounded me with exquisite elegance. At times, he wavered. His hold appeared more constrictive than before, and his eyes no longer expressed the soothing warmth of maternal care. At times, I noticed a gleam in his eyes, an enigmatic characteristic I could not entirely comprehend. In those moments, my heart would race due to an ambiguous warning I could not understand. Yet I reassured myself it was nothing, only a fleeting thought, the creation of my imagination. Yet despite my efforts to dismiss it, the sensation persisted as a subtle reminder that circumstances had changed. As previously stated, Mike maintains excellent physical condition. Despite his age, he possesses a robust and athletic physique. He is not only my father but also an emblem of strength and confidence. I have consistently appreciated him for his broad shoulders and towering, robust physique. I cannot refute that he is an impressive man, attractive in a manner that captures attention every time she walks by. I experience a warmth, an emotion I cannot really identify. It may be appreciation, although recently this feeling has subtly transitioned to something indefinable. Kindly inform me whether this meets your expectations for Part 1, or if you require any additional modifications before proceeding to Part 2. It felt distinct, It was not the uncomplicated admiration a daughter had for her father. An additional nebulous and inexplicable sensation left me disquieted. Occasionally, I found myself observing him for an extended duration, and whenever I was near him, an unexpected sensation stirred within me, as if it were an ordinary day. Upon returning home from school, I found Mark already present. He consistently arrived before my mother, typically reclining on the sofa with his gaze fixed on the television screen. Upon entering, I immediately recognized him, exuding tranquility and familiarity without hesitation. Notwithstanding my age, I approached and intuitively positioned myself on his lap as I had in childhood. It seemed inherently natural and secure, or at least it once did. Mark embraced me as he frequently did. However, this instance felt distinct. The warmth persisted. However, the atmosphere between us had transformed into a layer of discomfort. I reassured myself that it was merely my imagination, an odd concept that would dissipate. However, it was not a transient idea. I began to perceive something pressing against me, something that initially induced discomfort. I attempted to dismiss it, persuading myself it was merely an uncomfortable posture or perhaps an object in his pocket. Nevertheless, the longer I remained seated, the more irrefutable it got, and my heart started to accelerate. The atmosphere became oppressive, inducing a sense of unease that enveloped me, leaving me feeling uneasy and uncertain about how to navigate the intimacy that had previously been reassuring, but now rendered me vulnerable and anxious. Although we remained silent, I could perceive that Mark's stare was equally strained. While I was secretly frightened, we remained in that position until the front door abruptly opened. The sound of my mother's footfall reverberated through the hall, alleviating the tension like a refreshing breeze. I desired to rise, yet it felt as though I were immobilized, incapable of movement. Mark remained silent. She simply fixed me with a gaze. I could no longer perceive when my mother arrived, as the atmosphere shifted abruptly. I averted my gaze swiftly, rising with a smile, feigning normalcy. Yet that peculiar sensation persisted. Weighing on my heart, it was something that couldn't easily go back to the way it had been outwardly. Everything seemed the same, but inside something had changed. Mark began paying more attention to me, asking about my day, noticing details about my life he'd never asked about before he even started buying me new clothes, small gifts that seemed random but frequent. At first I felt confused by these gifts, but gradually I couldn't shake the feeling that his attention was no longer simply fatherly. Every time he looked at me with each thoughtful gesture, I felt a strange sense of closeness, as though the space between us wasn't what it used to be. A shift that was more than just physical. His gaze lingered a little too long, and our silences stretched a bit further. I sensed the subtle changes between us, but I didn't know how to confront them. Then came the day when everything between us shifted completely. A moment I will never forget. Mom had to leave for a business trip. Leaving Mark and me alone at home that evening, I returned from school to find a surprising scene at the dining table was beautifully set. More elaborate than I'd ever seen the house feel different. A soft glow from the candlelight cast a warm, almost romantic hue across the room. Plates of delicious food adorned the table, and 2 bottles of red wine stood between us. I couldn't help but laugh in surprise, my eyes wide as I looked at Mark with a smile. "Why all this?" I asked, amused but unsuspecting. He explained, smiling, that he'd received good news at work and thought it was the perfect occasion to celebrate. His smile was reassuring, and I felt my own excitement rise, just eager to share a nice dinner with him. We settled at the table, eating and talking. The wine flowed freely, and the soft candlelight cast a cozy warmth that made everything feel more intimate than ever in that moment. I felt nothing out of place. Everything seemed perfectly familiar, yet as the evening wore on, the closeness between us took on a different tone, a feeling I couldn't put a name to. We laughed and reminisced, sharing stories from my childhood, old jokes and sweet memories that made us laugh, as if all the tension had melted away into laughter. The warmth in the room felt like a comforting embrace, and I found myself savoring the closeness, letting myself fall into the nostalgia of it all. By the time we finished the second bottle of wine, I felt warm, hazy dizziness set in my mind that clouded my thoughts. Drifting the dimly lit bar with its hazy atmosphere and the clinking of glasses seemed to amplify the pounding in my chest. The alcohol, a dangerous liberator, loosened the grip of my inhibitions, allowing me to inch closer to my father. He sat across from me, his familiar features etched with a weariness that mirrored my own inner turmoil. A question I had never dared to voice suddenly escaped my lips. "Do you like me?" My voice was barely a whisper, yet it hung heavy in the air between us, charged with a meaning that transcended the usual affection between father and son. He turned to me. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and reassurance, now held a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by an intense scrutiny that seemed to pierce through my facade. A pregnant silence stretched between us, each second feeling like an eternity. "Yes," he finally replied. His voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. The single word with unspoken emotions shattered the fragile barrier between us, revealing a connection that defied definition. An inexplicable urge overcame me, a need for closeness that I could no longer deny. I reached out my hand, trembling, and gently touched his cheek. He leaned into my touch, his eyelids closing as if savoring the unexpected contact induced by an unexplained want. I leaned towards him and kissed him. The preliminary interaction was cautious. Feet-hurl brush of lips against lips, but it ignited a fire within me, melting away the years of suppressed longing and unleashing a torrent of emotions I had kept buried deep inside. He responded with a fervor that matched my own arms encircling my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. The kiss deepened, becoming a desperate exploration of forbidden territory, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken desires that had simmered between us for far too long. My heart hammered against my ribs, the rhythm echoing the frantic beating of his own heart against my chest. His hands moved to my back, caressing me with a tenderness that belied the intensity of our embrace. He traced the lines of my spine, his touch sending waves of heat through my body. He stood up, pulling me with him, and led me to a secluded corner of the bar away from prying eyes there in the dim light. He kissed me again with his hands, exploring my body with a newfound boldness. I shivered under his touch, every nerve ending alive with sensation. He lifted me onto a nearby table, our legs entwining as we clung to each other. His touch became more insistent, his fingers unbuttoning my shirt, revealing the skin beneath me. A wave of vulnerability washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by an overwhelming sense of surrender. We made love there in the shadows, our bodies moving in a silent dance of passion and desperation. Each touch, each kiss, was a rebellion against the constraints of our reality, a defiance of the societal norms that sought to keep us apart. As we lay entwined, our breathing gradually returning to normal, a profound sense of peace settled over me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and truly understood. The weight of our transgression was undeniable, but in that moment it felt insignificant compared to the overwhelming power of our connection. The next morning, the harsh light of day brought with it a renewed sense of guilt and fear. We parted ways, returning to our separate lives, but the memory of the night before, a secret fire burning within us. Our stolen encounters continued, each a dangerous dance on the edge of a precipice. We knew we were playing with fire, risking everything for a love that society deemed taboo. But the pull of our forbidden desire was too strong to resist. The conflict within me raged, tearing me apart. I loved my mother, yet I couldn't deny the undeniable bond one shared with her. My father and I were trapped in a web of our own making, caught between the yearning for acceptance and the fear of exposure. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the tension between us crackled in the air. My mother's intuition, sharpened by years of unspoken truths, finally confronted us. With her voice trembling with suspicion, the truth spilled out of me, a torrent of words that I could no longer contain. My father's pale face, but resolutely confirmed my confession. The revelation shattered our family, leaving us broken and exposed. But amidst the wreckage, a new path emerged. We had crossed a line defied convention, and in doing so, we had discovered a love that transcended the boundaries of societal expectations. The future was uncertain. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but we faced it together, hand in hand, bound by a love that refused to be denied. My skin tingled under his gaze, every nerve ending aware of his proximity. He lifted me as if I weighed nothing, his strong arms a comforting prison. I clung to him, burying my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of his skin, a mix of familiar comfort and forbidden desire. Our breaths mingled with each inhale and exhale, a shared symphony of escalating passion. He carried me through the dimly lit house, and the shadows dancing around us like silent conspirators in the world outside ceased to existing. Time became meaningless. There was only this moment, this intense connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. He gently laid me on the bed, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my heart flutter when our lips met again. The kiss is a culmination of unspoken desires, a release of pent-up longing. For it was a dance of passion and tenderness, a desperate attempt to fuse our souls into one. I felt his hot breath against my skin, the rapid beat of his heart mirroring the frantic rhythm of my own. His hands moved with practiced grace, slowly unbuttoning my shirt with each touch, sending a shiver of anticipation through me. With every layer of clothing shed, and a wave of vulnerability washed over me. It wasn't just the physical nakedness but the emotional exposure, the baring of our souls, that made my breath hitch. Yet with each passing moment the fear and hesitancy melted away, replaced by an all-consuming sense of surrender. That night we shattered all boundaries. We were no longer father and son but two souls intertwined, two hearts beating in unison. Every touch, every caress was a silent vow, a desperate attempt to etch ourselves onto each other's very being. We gave each other everything. Not just the physical intimacy that had been denied for so long but the raw, unfiltered emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface. We poured our hearts out, confessing the secret desires and unspoken fears that had haunted us for years. In the aftermath of our passion, as we lay tangled in the sheets, a sense of completeness washed over me. It was as if we had found the missing piece of ourselves in each other, a connection that defied all logic and societal norms. The next morning, with the return of reality, we resumed our roles, the facade of normality a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions that raged within us. But something had irrevocably changed. A silent understanding hung in the air, a shared secret that bound us together. Every glance and every touch held a new meaning, a hidden language that only we could decipher. We knew it was wrong, a transgression against the sacred bond of family, yet we couldn't deny the powerful connection we had found. Our meetings became clandestine, stolen moments of passion amidst the chaos of our everyday lives. The conflict between guilt and desire raged within me, a constant battle between what I knew to be right and the undeniable yearning of my heart. We were living a lie, a dangerous game that threatened to destroy everything we held dear. But in those stolen moments when we were lost in each other's embrace of the world faded away, and all that mattered was the undeniable truth of our love. We were two souls bound by a forbidden desire, forever caught in the delicate balance between love and sin. The unspoken agreement hung heavy in the air between us. Every stolen glance and every lingering touch reaffirmed our commitment to this forbidden path. We were bound by an invisible thread woven from desire and defiance. One night, with my mother away on a religious retreat, the silence of the house pressed in on me. I lay in bed drifting in a sea of dreams when a subtle shift in the mattress stirred me from my slumber. I opened my eyes to find my father beside me, his familiar form a comforting presence in the darkness. His arm was draped over my waist, pulling me closer, his warmth enveloping me like a cherished blanket. A jolt of surprise shot through me, but it quickly gave way to a sweet surrender. I turned towards him, a soft smile gracing my lips. In that moment, the weight of our secret and the fear of discovery faded away, leaving only the comforting reality of his presence. "Dad," I whispered, "be careful." Mom wouldn't understand. My words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken anxieties. Each syllable felt like a betrayal, a reminder of the precarious, tight RPP we were walking. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drum beat against the silence of the night. I clung to him with my fingers, digging into the fabric of his shirt, seeking an anchor in the storm of my emotions. The room was eerily still, every creak of the floorboards and every of the sheets amplified in the quiet darkness. The fear of discovery had become a constant companion, a shadow lurking in the corners of our stolen moments. Yet despite the ever-present danger, I couldn't bring myself to end it. I was trapped in the intoxicating allure of our forbidden love, unable to resist the pull of his embrace. Then one day the inevitable happened. My mother called, her voice laced with regret, informing us that she wouldn't be returning home that night. Wave of relief washed over me and quickly followed by a surge of anticipation. We were free for one night at least to indulge in our secret desires without fear of interruption. We spent the evening wrapped in each other's arms, lost in a world of stolen kisses and whispered confessions. We were careless, reckless, even blinded by the illusion of safety. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The front door creaked open, shattering the peaceful silence. My mother stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief at the scene before her husband and son entwined in a compromise. Embrace was a cruel betrayal of her trust. A devastating confirmation of her worst fears. Time seemed to freeze. The air thickened with unspoken accusations and shattered dreams. My mother's silence was more deafening than any scream in that moment. I knew that our secret was out, our forbidden love exposed to the harsh light of day. The intricate universe we had built disintegrated down around us, leaving us to face the devastating consequences of our actions. The weight of our secret hung between us, an unspoken promise woven into every stolen glance and lingering touch. We were addicted to the thrill of the forbidden fruit of our twisted desire. We knew it was wrong, a dangerous game with devastating consequences, yet neither of us dared to speak of stopping. One night, with the house shrouded in an eerie silence, my mother away on a spiritual retreat, my father crept into my room. I was lost in the depths of sleep, oblivious to his presence, until I awoke to the unfamiliar warmth of his body pressed against mine. Disoriented, I turned to find him beside me, his familiar face inches from my. A wave of shock surged through me, but it quickly subsided, replaced by a comforting sense of familiarity that reached out my fingers, tracing the lines of his face and etching his features into my memory. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. What if Mom comes back? He hushed me with a gentle kiss, his lips silencing my worries. She won't, he murmured, his voice a soothing balm against my anxieties. We have tonight, just the two of us. But even in the darkness, the fear of discovery lingered, a constant shadow cast over our stolen moments. It was a thrilling, terrifying dance on the edge of a precipice, and I was both terrified and exhilarated by the days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and secret rendezvous. We lived in a constant state of heightened awareness. Our senses are tuned to every creak of the floorboard, every whisper in the hallway. Then one day the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace we had constructed. My mother's voice, strained and apologetic, informed us that she wouldn't be returning home as planned. A wave of relief was followed by an overwhelming sensation of shame that consumed me that night. We abandoned all caution, our enthusiasm fueled by a misguided sense of security, becoming trapped in our own world. Oblivious to the impending storm, the sudden click of the door latch disturbed the silence acutely. My mother was frozen in the doorway, her eyes widening in horror as she took in the scene before her. The earth seemed to revolve on its axis. My breath was restricted. My pulse raced against my ribs like a trapped bird. My father's face lacked color, and his eyes mirrored a mixture of humiliation and distress. The subsequent silence was suffocating. My mother's eyes darted between us, her expression filled with betrayal, anguish, and disbelief, while the atmosphere was thick with unspoken accusations, the weight of our transgressions suffocating us in silence. She turned and fled, leaving us amidst the remnants of our shattered family. The house, previously a sanctuary of warmth and joy, now appeared bleak and empty, a mausoleum of broken trust and unrest. The ensuing days were plagued by horrible dreams. My mother did not reciprocate her absence, an enduring memory of the anguish we caused. The divorce papers arrived, an official declaration of the end of a love I had considered invulnerable. I was lost in a chaotic ocean of guilt and regret. The foundation of my existence has crumbled, forcing me to face the consequences of my actions. My father, once my pillar of strength, has now transformed into a source of shame and sorrow. The pain of my betrayal caused deep sorrow, leaving an irreparable void in my mother's heart. I had destroyed the family I valued for the sake of an unlawful desire. I am presently at a juncture, unsure of which path to take in. The future stretches before for me uncertain and bleeding. I have lost the love and trust of both my parents, and the guilt of my actions weigh heavily on my soul. And I know that I will forever bear the scars of this experience, a constant reminder of the devastating consequences of my choices. But I also know that I must find a way to move forward, to learn from my mistakes, and to somehow rebuild my life from the ashes of my past. The raw agony in her eyes mirrored the shattering of my own heart in that moment. The world crumbled around us, the weight of our transgression crushing us all. I felt suffocated, unable to speak to apologize or explain why my father stood beside me. Equally speechless, his face etched with a deep regret that mirrored my own. The air crackled with tension, the silence deafening. There was no room for excuses, no space for forgiveness. My mother didn't utter as she simply turned and walked away, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. The house became a tomb. The silence was unbearable. Every corner held a memory. Every shadow whispered accusations we were strangers in our own home. The intimacy we had shared is now a twisted mockery of. The love we had destroyed. Days turned into weeks, the silence stretching into an eternity. My mother didn't return, and finally, the divorce papers arrived. A stark reminder of the irreversible damage we had caused. The house to grow cold and empty. Shell of its former self, I was left to wander its hollow halls, haunted by the ghosts of our shattered family. Lost and alone, I was torn between my parents. My father, once my hero, was now the source of my deepest shame. Mother, the woman who had nurtured and loved me unconditionally, was now a stranger to her. Heartbroken beyond repair, my selfish desires and reckless pursuit of forbidden pleasure had led to this devastation. I had destroyed everything I held dear. The consequences of my actions extended far beyond my own pain. I had shattered the trust and love that had bound our family together, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Now, standing amidst the ruins of my life, I realized the importance of boundaries, the sanctity of family ties, and love, no matter how intense, cannot justify the violation of those sacred bonds. I have learned a harsh lesson that will forever haunt me. There are mistakes that cannot be undone, wounds that cannot be healed. My story serves as a warning, cautionary tale for those who might stray from the path of righteousness. Be vigilant and respect the boundaries that protect the sanctity of family. Don't let fleeting emotions cloud your judgment. Don't let weakness lead you down a path of regret. Cherish the love and trust that bind you together. Once broken, they may never be fully restored. Thank you for listening. If my story has touched your heart, please like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next chapter of my journey as I navigate the long and arduous road to redemption.